The small research shuttle moved quietly through the darkness of space. Inside, Lieutenant Park Yuna checked her equipment one more time. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life forms. Her mission was simple: fly near the neutral zone, collect some samples from a passing asteroid, and return home. Nothing dangerous. Nothing exciting. She was wrong. The first warning came as a soft beep on her control panel. Yuna looked up from her notes and saw 3 large shapes appearing on her scanner. Ships, big ones. They were not human ships. Unknown vessels. "This is Lieutenant Park Yuna of the United Earth Research Division," she said into her communicator. "I am conducting peaceful scientific research. Please identify yourselves." There was no answer. The ships moved closer. Yuna felt her heart beat faster. She had trained for situations like this. But training and reality were very different things. The ships belonged to the Valori Dominion. Yuna recognized their design from her studies. The Valori were a reptilian species, tall and covered in green scales. They controlled 3 star systems and had a reputation for being aggressive and proud. They did not like other species entering space they considered theirs, human vessel. A harsh voice finally came through her speakers. "You are in Valor territory. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Yuna's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained calm. "I am in the neutral zone. This area belongs to no one. I have broken no laws. Valori law is the only law that matters here," the voice replied. "Power down now, or we will destroy your ship." Yuna looked at her options. Her shuttle had no weapons. She could try to run, but their ships were faster. She could fight, but she had nothing to fight with. She thought about her family back on Earth, her mother, who always worried too much, her younger brother, who dreamed of becoming a pilot himself one day. She powered down her engines. The Valori soldiers, who boarded her shuttle, were exactly as she had imagined. Tall, cold, and without any kindness in their yellow eyes. Their leader, an officer with scars across his face, looked at her like she was an insect. "A scientist," he said, reading her identification. "Or perhaps a spy." "I am not a spy," Yuna said firmly. "I study plants and bacteria. Nothing more," the officer laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "That is what a spy would say. You will come with us. Fleet Commander Reth will decide what to do with you." They put heavy metal restraints on her wrists and took her to their largest ship. Yuna did not resist. She knew it would only make things worse. But as she walked through the cold metal corridors of the Valori vessel, she pressed a small button hidden inside her sleeve. It was a distress beacon. A tiny signal that would travel across space until it reached human ears. Someone would hear it. Someone would come. She had to believe that. Thousands of light years away. Captain Lite was drinking coffee in his office when the message arrived. He was a career military officer, 52 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the United Earth Navy for 30 years and thought he had seen everything. He had not seen this. "Sir," his communications officer said, her face pale, "we received a distress signal from the neutral zone. It's from Lieutenant Park Yuna. She's been captured by the Valor Dominion." Tay put down his coffee cup very slowly. "Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. Her beacon is transmitting from a Valori military vessel."
Ow. Tay stood up.
He had never met Lieutenant Park personally, but that did not matter. She was human. She was one of them. He walked to the main communication center and contacted the Galactic Assembly, the organization that was supposed to keep peace between all the species of the galaxy. The Valori ambassador, a large reptile named Doran, appeared on his screen. He looked bored. "Captain Lee," Doran said, his tongue flicking out between his teeth. "What do you want?" "Your people have taken one of our citizens prisoner," Tay said, keeping his voice steady. "Lieutenant Park Yuna. We demand her immediate release." Doran stared at him for a long moment. Then he started laughing. The sound echoed through the communication center. "You demand," Doran said. "Humans demand nothing. You are newcomers, children playing in space. You have 12 small colony worlds and a tiny fleet. We have 3 star systems and 400 warships. Your Lieutenant Park entered our space without permission. She is now our prisoner. Forget about her. She was in the neutral zone, Tay said through clenched teeth. The neutral zone is wherever we say it is, Doran replied. This conversation is over. The screen went dark. Tay stood very still for a long moment. The officers around him were silent, waiting to see what he would do. Finally, he turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going, sir? His communications officer asked. To talk to the president, Tay said. Personally. President Choi Hannah was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She had been a diplomat before becoming president, known for her patience and her ability to find peaceful solutions to difficult problems. But when Captain Lee Tay showed her the recording of his conversation with Ambassador Doran, something changed in her face. She watched the Valori ambassador laugh. She watched him dismiss a human life as if it meant nothing. They took one of ours? She asked quietly. Yes, Madam President. Choi Hannah looked out the window of her office. Earth hung below them, blue and green and beautiful. 8 billion people lived on that planet. Millions more lived on the 12 colony worlds scattered across nearby star systems. Every single one of them was precious. Every single one of them mattered. Call the council, she said. Now, the United Earth Council met within the hour. The vote was unanimous. No debate, no hesitation. They knew what needed to be done. 6 hours after Lieutenant Park Yuna was captured, a message was broadcast to every species in the galaxy. It was short and clear. This is President Choi Hannah of United Earth. The Valori Dominion has taken one of our citizens prisoner. We demand her return, alive and unharmed, within 72 hours. If this demand is not met, there will be consequences. Across the galaxy, alien species received the message. Some ignored it. Some laughed at it. The Valori Fleet Commander Reth reportedly found it so funny that he could not stop laughing for several minutes. Humanity. They all agreed was weak, small, unimportant. What could 12 colony worlds do against the mighty Valori Dominion? They would soon find out, and they would never forget. Fleet Commander Reth sat in his command chair and read the human message again. He was an old soldier with dark green scales and eyes that had seen 100 battles. He had fought against the Karathi Federation. He had crushed rebellions on 3 different worlds. He was not afraid of anything, and he was certainly not afraid of humans. 72 hours, he said to his officers, a smile spreading across his reptilian face. They give us 72 hours. How generous of them. His officers laughed with him. They had all seen the reports on humanity, a young species. Barely 40 years in space, 12 colony worlds, fewer than 60 warships, most of them small and poorly armed. The mathematics were simple. The Valori had 400 warships. The humans had 60. This was not a threat. This was a joke. Should we respond, Commander? One of his officers asked. Reth waved his clawed hand dismissively. Why bother? Let them count down their hours. When the time runs out, they will do nothing. They cannot do anything. They are weak. On the Valori homeworld, in a dark cell beneath the military complex, Lieutenant Park Yuna sat with her back against the cold stone wall. Her wrists were bruised from the restraints. Her body ached from the rough treatment she had received, but her spirit was not broken. A Valori officer named Skell visited her every few hours. He asked the same questions again and again. What was her real mission? Who sent her? What secrets did she know? Yuna gave the same answers every time. She was a scientist. She studied alien plants. She had no secrets to share. Skell grew more frustrated with each visit. He could not understand this small human female. She should be afraid. She should be begging for mercy. Instead, she sat calmly and looked at him with steady eyes. Your people have sent us a message, Skell told her during one visit. They demand your release. They threaten consequences. He laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. They are fools. Your little fleet cannot save you. No one can save you. Yuna looked at him and smiled. It was a small smile, but it made Skell uncomfortable in a way he could not explain. "You really do not know humans at all, do you?" she said softly. Skell left her cell without another word. But her smile stayed in his mind, and for the first time, he felt a tiny seed of doubt. Far across the galaxy, in secret places that no one knew about, something was waking up. When humanity first made contact with alien species 40 years ago, they expected friendship. They expected cooperation. They expected wonder and discovery and a new age of exploration. Instead, they found a universe filled with species that looked at them with suspicion, contempt, or hunger. The strong dominated the weak. Alliances were made and broken for profit. No one cared about fairness or justice or kindness. The galaxy was not a place of wonder. It was a place of danger. The governments of Earth came together in secret. They made a decision that would change everything. They would prepare for war, but they would never let anyone know. For 40 years, humanity built, in hidden shipyards carved into asteroids, in secret factories beneath the surface of the moon, in underground facilities on a dozen colony worlds. They studied every alien species, every weapon, every technology they could find. They learned. They improved. They created things the galaxy had never seen, and they waited. Admiral Kang Wu was 70 years old. He had white hair and a calm face that rarely showed emotion. He had spent his entire career preparing for a moment he hoped would never come. Now that moment was here. He stood in the command center of the hidden military base called Shadow Station. Around him, screens showed hundreds of ships coming to life. Ships that officially did not exist. Ships that no alien had ever seen. "How many do we have ready?" President Choi asked through the secure communication channel. 812 vessels, Madam President, Kong replied. All fully armed and crewed. "We can launch within 6 hours." There was a pause. 800, the President repeated. "And they think we have 60. "Yes, Madam President. We have been very careful." President Choi was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke again. "Admiral King, bring our people home. All of them." "Yes, Madam President." The hidden fleet began to move. Engines that had been cold for years roared to life. Crews who had trained in secret for decades took their positions. Weapons systems that existed nowhere in any galactic database. Powered up and prepared for battle. Humanity was going to war. At the 71st hour, a ship arrived at Earth. It carried Ambassador Hell of the Netheri, an ancient species known for their diplomatic skills. The Netheri were thin creatures with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They had existed for thousands of years and believed they understood how the galaxy worked. Ambassador Hell came to convince humanity to stand down. He brought offers of mediation, promises of negotiations, suggestions of compromise. He was very confident that he could calm these emotional young humans and prevent a pointless conflict. President Choi received him in her office with perfect politeness. She offered him tea. She listened to his proposals. She nodded at appropriate moments. Then she showed him something. On the large screen behind her desk, a live feed appeared. It showed ships. Hundreds of ships. They were jumping into hyperspace, disappearing in flashes of light. One after another, Ambassador Hell watched in silence. His pale blue skin became even paler. "This is not in our records," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We counted 60 vessels. How is this possible?" "We are not what you think we are," President Choi said calmly. "We never were. You saw what we wanted you to see. Now you see the truth. But the Valori, they do not know. No, they do not." President Choi looked at the clock on her wall. "You have 1 hour, Ambassador. I suggest you contact the Valori and tell them to evacuate any non-combatants from their military installations. We have no wish to harm civilians." Ambassador Hell stood up so quickly that he nearly fell. "President Choi, please, I beg you to reconsider. War is not the answer. We can negotiate. We can find a peaceful solution. We tried peace, President Choi replied. Her voice was still calm, but there was steel beneath the softness. We asked for the return of one person, one scientist who harmed no one. They laughed at us. They called us weak. They said our people do not matter. She paused. We are going to teach them that every human matters. Every single one. Ambassador Hell left Earth with shaking hands and a racing heart. He had lived for 300 years. He had seen wars between great powers, the rise and fall of empires, the death of entire species. But he had never felt fear like this before, because in President Choi's calm eyes, he had seen something terrifying. Not anger, not hatred. Something worse, certainty, humanity. Was not hoping to win this war. They knew they would win, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The 72 hours ended at exactly midnight, Earth Standard Time. Fleet Commander Reth was sleeping when his officers woke him with urgent news. Human ships had been detected entering Valori space. Reth dressed quickly and walked to the command bridge of his flagship. He was not worried. He had positioned 400 of his best warships in a defensive formation around the Valori homeworld. Whatever small fleet the humans sent, he would crush it easily. How many ships? He asked his sensor officer. The officer stared at his screen. His yellow eyes were wide with something Reth had never seen in them before. Fear. Commander, the officer said slowly, I am counting. I must be counting wrong. How many? Reth demanded. 800, sir. 800 human vessels. Reth grabbed the officer's shoulder and pushed him aside. He looked at the screen himself. The numbers did not lie. Ships were pouring out of hyperspace like water from a broken dam. They came in perfect formation, each one taking its position with mathematical precision. The darkness of space filled with human vessels. 800 ships, not 60. 800, for the first time in his long military career. Fleet Commander Reth felt his stomach drop with cold fear. Admiral Kong. Wu sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Earth's Fury. The ship was the largest vessel humanity had ever built. 3 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could destroy a small moon. Around him, his bridge crew worked in calm silence. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. Open a channel to the Valori commander, Kong ordered. The screen flickered, and Fleet Commander Reth appeared. The old reptile's face was pale, his eyes darting nervously to something off-screen. Probably the sensor display showing his doom. This is Admiral Kong Wu of the United Earth Navy, Kong said, his voice steady and cold. We are here for Lieutenant Park Yuna. You have 2 options. Surrender her immediately and stand down your fleet, and your civilian population will not be harmed. Resist, and we will destroy your military capability completely. You have 5 minutes to decide. Reth's face twisted with anger and fear. Pride and terror fought for control of his mind. He had 400 ships. Still a large fleet. Still dangerous. Perhaps he could fight. Perhaps he could win. He made his choice. Valori's ships never surrender, Reth snarled. All vessels, attack formation. Destroy the human fleet. The Valori ships surged forward. Their weapons fired, filling space with deadly energy beams and missiles. It was an impressive display of firepower, the kind that had crushed many enemies before. It was not enough. The human ships moved like a single organism. They did not fight like the species of the Galactic Assembly, who valued caution and careful calculation. Humans fought with a wild aggression that seemed almost suicidal. Their ships dove straight into enemy fire, taking damage that would have made any other species retreat, but they did not retreat. They pressed forward, and their weapons spoke with terrible voices. Human railguns fired metal projectiles at speeds that no Valori shield could stop. The projectiles punched through armor like it was paper, leaving massive holes in Valori warships. Human plasma cannons burned through whole metal in seconds. Human missiles flew in complicated patterns that confused Valor. Targeting systems, and then there were the human pilots. The Valori had always believed that space combat was about mathematics and logic. Calculate the odds. Make the safe choice. Preserve your ships and crews for another day. Humans did not think that way. Human pilots flew their fighters directly into the gaps in Velori formations. They took risks that no sane pilot would take. They sacrificed their own ships to protect their comrades. They fought with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside their souls. One human pilot, her fighter badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, flew her ship directly into the bridge of a Velori cruiser. She died instantly, but so did everyone on that bridge. Her last words, recorded by her ship's computer, were simple. For Yuna, for Earth, for everyone. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, 312 Velori warships were destroyed or floating dead in space. The remaining Velori ships fled in panic, their crews broken by what they had witnessed. Humanity lost 23 vessels. Every death hurt. Every loss was mourned. But the victory was complete. While the space battle raged above, a different kind of fight was happening on the ground. Major Shinbin led a special operations team of 40 soldiers. Their mission was simple: rescue Lieutenant Park, Yuna. Their shuttle descended through the Velori atmosphere. While the enemy fleet was distracted by the battle in space, Shin was 35 years old. With a shaved head and a scar across his left cheek, he had been a soldier for 15 years and had never lost a team member on a mission. He did not plan to start now. 2 minutes to landing, the pilot announced. Shin checked his weapon one more time. Around him, his soldiers did the same. They were the best Earth had to offer. Each one had volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. Each one had only one thought in their mind: bring their fellow human home. The shuttle landed hard in a courtyard outside the detention facility. Alarms immediately began wailing. Velori guards rushed toward them, weapons raised. They never had a chance. Human soldiers in advanced combat armor moved through the facility like ghosts of death. Their weapons were precise and deadly. Their coordination was perfect. They had studied the building plans for months. They knew every corridor, every door, every possible hiding spot. Shin led the way to the detention level. 2 Velori guards tried to stop him. 2 Velori guards died. He kicked open the heavy metal door and found himself in a long hallway lined with cells. Lieutenant Park, he shouted. Lieutenant Park Yuna. Here a voice called back. I am here. Shin ran to the cell. Inside, he saw a young woman with bruises on her face and cuts on her arms. But her eyes were bright, and she was smiling. He blasted the lock off the cell door and caught her as she stumbled out. She was weak from her time in captivity, barely able to stand. Major Shinbin, United Earth Special Operations, he said. We are taking you home. Yuna looked up at him. Tears were forming in her eyes, but she was still smiling. I knew you would come, she whispered. I never doubted it. Not for a single moment. We always come, Shin replied. He lifted her in his arms and began carrying her toward the exit. No matter how far, no matter how dangerous, we never leave anyone behind. As they emerged from the facility, Yuna looked up at the sky. Through the smoke and chaos, she could see flashes of light in the darkness above. The battle was still finishing. Human ships were securing the space around the Velor homeworld. She thought about what the Velor had said to her, that she was not worth saving, that her people were weak, that no one would come for her. They had been so wrong. The shuttle lifted off and climbed toward space. Behind them, the Velori military complex burned. Above them, broken remains of the Velori fleet drifted in silence. Humanity had sent a message that the entire galaxy would hear. And the message was simple. Take one of ours and face all of us. Every single time, without exception, without mercy. The Galactic Assembly had never been so quiet. Representatives from 100 different species sat in the great circular chamber, staring at the screens that showed images from the Battle of Velori Prime. They watched human ships tear through the Velori fleet. They watched the numbers change from 400 enemy vessels to less than 90 in just 4 hours. No one knew what to say. Ambassador Helithan Athori finally stood up. He was still pale from his visit to Earth, still shaken by what President Choi had shown him. He looked around at his fellow representatives and saw his own fear reflected in their eyes. "We made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. "All of us. We looked at humanity and saw what we expected to see. Young species. Small territory. Limited resources. We assumed they were weak because they were new to space." He paused and took a deep breath. "We were wrong. They were never weak. They were patient. For 40 years they watched us. They studied our weapons, our strategies, our weaknesses. They learned from every species in this assembly. And then they built something greater than anything we could imagine." A representative from the Korathi Federation, a species of tall insect-like creatures, rose to speak. "Then we must act now," he said in his clicking voice. "Before they grow even stronger, we must form a coalition. All species together against this human threat. A coalition?" Ambassador Hell laughed bitterly. "Did you not see what they did to the Valori? 400 ships destroyed in 4 hours. And they lost only 23. What coalition could we possibly form that would stand against that?" "Then what do you suggest?" the Korathi representative demanded. "That we simply surrender? That we bow to these humans?" "I suggest," Hell replied slowly, "that we tried something we should have tried 40 years ago. I suggest we treat them with respect." The chamber erupted in arguments. Species that had never agreed on anything suddenly found themselves on the same side, united by fear. Some wanted war. Some wanted peace. Some wanted to hide and hope the humans would forget about them. On the Valori homeworld, things were even more chaotic. The government had collapsed within hours of the battle. Fleet Commander Reth was arrested by his own soldiers, who blamed him for the disaster. The old warrior was thrown into the same detention facility where he had once kept Lieutenant Park Yuna. The new Valori leader was a diplomat named Mora. She was younger than most Valori politicians. With lighter green scales and eyes that held more wisdom than pride, she had always believed that her species' aggressive ways would one day lead to disaster. She had been right. Her first act as Chancellor was to send a message to Earth. "President Choi," she said in the recorded message, "I am Chancellor Mora of the Valori Dominion. I wish to express my deepest apologies for the actions of my predecessors. The capture of Lieutenant Park Yuna was wrong. The refusal to return her was wrong. The arrogance with which we treated your people was wrong." She paused, her reptilian face showing genuine shame. "I request permission to travel to Earth personally. I wish to return your citizen to you myself, and to discuss how we might begin to heal the damage that has been done. I understand if you refuse, but I hope you will give my people a chance to show that we can be better than we were." President Choi watched the message in her office. Captain Lee Tae stood beside her, along with Admiral Kong, who had returned from the battle zone. "Do you believe her?" Tae asked. Top President Choi thought for a long moment. "I believe she is afraid, but I also believe she is sincere. Fear and sincerity can exist together." "She could be planning something," Admiral Kong warned. "A trap of some kind." Perhaps Choi agreed. "But we did not fight this war to become what they were. We fought to show them who we are. If we refuse every attempt at peace, we are no better than the species we defeated." She turned to her communication officer. "Tell Chancellor Mora that she may come to Earth, with one ship unarmed. Tell her that Lieutenant Park Yuna will be waiting to meet her." 3 days later, a single Valori shuttle landed on Earth. Chancellor Mora stepped out to find a crowd of thousands waiting for her. She had expected anger. She had expected hatred. She had expected to be attacked. Instead, she found silence. The humans simply watched her with calm, steady eyes. They did not cheer. They did not curse. They simply waited. Lieutenant Park Yuna stood at the front of the crowd. She had spent the last 3 days in a hospital, recovering from her injuries. She was still tired and sore, but she had insisted on being here. Chancellor Mora walked toward her slowly. When she reached Yuna, she did something that no Valori leader had ever done before. She bowed. "Lieutenant Park Yuna," Mora said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "On behalf of the Valori Dominion, I apologize for what was done to you. It was cruel. It was wrong. and it nearly destroyed my people. Yuna looked at the Valori leader for a long moment. She remembered the cold cell, the harsh questions, the pain and fear of those terrible days. She remembered Skell's mocking words, the certainty that she would be forgotten, but she also remembered something her grandmother had told her when she was young. Hatred is easy. Forgiveness is hard. But forgiveness is what makes us truly strong. I accept your apology, Yuna said quietly. And I hope that our peoples can move forward together. Chancellor Mora's eyes widened slightly. She had not expected forgiveness. Not after everything that had happened. You are remarkable, she said softly. Your whole species is remarkable. We thought your compassion was weakness. We thought your care for each other was foolishness. We were blind. President Choi stepped forward. Chancellor Mora, humanity did not want this war. We came to the stars hoping for friendship, for cooperation, for peace. You gave us suspicion, contempt, and cruelty. You took one of our people and thought we would do nothing? Her voice hardened slightly. But we did not fight this war for revenge. We fought because we believe that every life matters. Every person has value, and no one should ever be abandoned. She extended her hand toward the Valori leader. Let this be a new beginning. Not just for humans in Velor, but for the entire galaxy. A galaxy where all species are treated with dignity, where no one is dismissed as unimportant, where every individual is protected. Chancellor Mora took her hand. The crowd remained silent, but something had changed. The tension had shifted to something else, something that felt almost like hope. That night, billions of humans across Earth and the colony worlds watched the news. They saw the Valori Chancellor shaking hands with their president. They saw Lieutenant Park Yuna, tired but smiling, standing as proof that humanity never abandons its own. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. Species that had ignored humanity for decades suddenly wanted to talk. Trade delegations requested meetings. Military alliances were proposed. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans were not dangerous because of their ships or their weapons. They were dangerous because they would burn down entire empires to save a single person. And somehow, despite everything, they were still willing to offer forgiveness. That combination of fierce loyalty and unexpected mercy was more terrifying than any fleet, because it meant that humans could not be predicted, could not be controlled, could not be dismissed. They could only be respected, and so they would be. 6 months passed since the war. The galaxy was not the same place anymore. Everything had changed, and everyone knew why. On Earth, life continued in its normal rhythms. People went to work, children went to school, families gathered for meals and celebrations. But there was something different in the air. A quiet pride, a sense that humanity had proven something important to the universe. President Choi Hanna worked longer hours than ever before. Delegations from alien species arrived almost daily, seeking trade agreements, military alliances, cultural exchanges. Species that had once laughed at humanity now lined up at Earth's door, hoping for friendship. But Choi did not want allies who came to her out of fear. She wanted something more lasting. Something that would change the galaxy forever. She spent months working with her advisors on a document. They called it the New Galactic Charter. It was a simple idea, but a revolutionary one. Every individual in the galaxy had rights that could not be taken away. No citizen of any member world could be detained without cause. No species could be dismissed as minor or unimportant. Every life, regardless of which world it came from, had valued, and Ambassador Helavan Athori was one of the first to read the draft. He sat in President Choi's office, his large dark eyes moving slowly across the pages. Remarkable, he said finally. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, no one has ever proposed anything like this. That is precisely the problem, Choi replied. For 3,000 years, the strong have dominated the weak. The powerful have done whatever they wanted. And everyone accepted it as the natural order of things. She leaned forward in her chair. We do not accept it. We never will. Every human child learns from birth that all people have worth, that the strong should protect the weak, That justice is not just for those who can afford it. But how can this work? Hell asked. Who will enforce these rights? What happens when a powerful species decides to ignore the charter? Choi smiled slightly. It was not a threatening smile, but it was not entirely warm either. That is where humanity comes in. We will be the guardians of the charter. Any species that signs will have our protection. Any species that violates the rights of another will face consequences. You are offering to become the police of the galaxy. We are offering to become its conscience, Choi corrected. There is a difference. Hell was silent for a long moment, thinking about everything he had seen in the past 6 months. The military might of humanity. The mercy they had shown to the Valerie. The way they had welcomed Chancellor Mora instead of punishing her. I will support this charter, he said finally. The Nithori will be among the first to sign. One by one, other species followed. Some joined eagerly, seeing the charter as protection against larger, more aggressive neighbors. Others joined reluctantly, understanding that refusing would put them on the wrong side of humanity. A few refused entirely and retreated to the edges of known space. Watching and waiting, the Valor Dominion was among the first to sign. Chancellor Mora traveled to Earth herself to add her signature. When asked why she supported a charter that would limit her own species' power, she gave a simple answer. Because the old ways led us to disaster, she said. And because humanity showed us that there is a better path. Admiral Kongwu retired from active military duty after the charter was signed. He was 71 years old, tired but satisfied. He had spent his entire life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. The war had come. He had fought it. He had won it. Now it was time for younger leaders to take over. He returned to Earth and accepted a position at the Naval Academy, teaching the next generation of officers. On his first day, he stood before a classroom of young cadets, their faces eager and curious. You have probably heard many things about the war, he told them. Stories of great battles, brilliant tactics, powerful weapons. All of those things are true, but they are not the most important part of the story. He paused, looking at each young face in turn. We did not win because we had more ships. We did not win because we had better technology. We won because we refused to leave anyone behind. Because when the Velori took Lieutenant Park Yuna, we did not calculate the cost of saving her. We did not weigh her value against the risk. We simply said, she is one of us, and we are going to bring her home. He walked slowly across the front of the classroom. That is what makes us human. Not our intelligence. Not our creativity. Not our ability to build great machines. What makes us human is our loyalty to each other. Our refusal to accept that any life is expendable. Our belief that every person matters. Remember that, he concluded. In every decision you make, in every battle you fight, in every moment of your career. The mission is never more important than the people. The victory is worthless if we sacrifice who we are to achieve it. The cadets listened in silence, understanding that they were hearing something more valuable than any tactical lesson 1 year after the war. Lieutenant Park Yuna returned to active duty. She had been promoted to commander and given a new assignment. First officer of the exploration vessel Unity. It was the first ship in the galaxy with a mixed human and Valor crew. The assignment was symbolic. Of course, a former prisoner serving alongside members of the species that had captured her. But Yuna had requested the position specifically. If we want the galaxy to change, she told President Choi, we have to show them what cooperation looks like. We cannot just talk about unity. We have to live it. On the day of the Unity's first mission, Yuna stood on the bridge and looked out at the stars. The Valori officers on board had been nervous around her at first, ashamed of what their people had done. But she had worked hard to make them feel welcome. She had learned their language, studied their customs, shared meals with them in their style. Slowly, the walls had come down. They were becoming a real crew, a real family. The ship's captain, a human woman named Sonari, gave the order to depart. The Unity moved away from Earth's orbit and headed toward unknown space. They were going further than any joint mission had gone before, searching for new worlds, new species, new possibilities. Yuna watched the stars streak past as the ship entered faster than light travel. She thought about everything that had happened since that terrible day when the Velore had captured her shuttle. The fear, the pain, the hope that never died, and then the rescue. The war. The peace that followed. She thought about what the Velore had believed about her. That saving one person was not worth the trouble. That she was too unimportant to matter. They had been so completely, utterly wrong. "Commander Park," Captain So said, "we are approaching the first survey coordinates. Ready to begin?" Yuna turned from the window and nodded. "Ready, Captain?" She took her position and began her work. Around her, humans and Velore worked side by side, united in purpose. Outside, the universe stretched out an infinite possibility. Behind them, the galaxy was slowly healing. The old ways of fear and domination were fading. A new order was rising, built on principles that humanity had carried from Earth to the stars. Every life has value. Every person matters. No one gets left behind. These were more than words. They were promises. And humanity would keep them, no matter the cost, because that was what made them human. And now, finally, the galaxy understood.